We have an excellent panel this afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce them to you. I want to start with Vivian Onano, who is a student as well as a panelist today. She is from Kisumu, Kenya. She is here as an ambassador for the Global Give Back Circle, which she's going to tell you more about. I don't know, we're thrilled to have her here. She has her own remarkable story, which we're going to hear more about in a minute, as well as her own remarkable commitment, which is awfully inspiring, at least to me, and I assume it will be to you. Our next guest is Joel Arquillos. He is the executive director of 826 LA. I don't know how many of you know about 826 National, but it is a remarkable organization that provides support, creative writing, support, educational support for students in how many centers now? 8 centers around the country, and Joel is the executive director of the LA branch. And finally, Margaret, Meagher, I'm gonna just butcher it, Margaret, I know I shouldn't have even asked you, but is the program manager for youth learning at the MasterCard Foundation. She has 20 years experience in the education field internationally. She worked at CARE for many years and has studied education in at least 17, or overseen education projects for CARE in 17 different countries around the world. She's by far our resident expert on the international scene. And with that, I don't have a microphone, so I'm going to stand over. Oh, I can take this one. So let's sit. I assume you all are here because you believe, as we believe, that education is one of the most important interventions that we can make on the global stage, as well as here domestically, in terms of ending global poverty and making the world a better place. And as you all probably also know, getting an education is a challenge almost everywhere in the world, but it is an extreme challenge in the developing world. And I wanted to see if Margaret could just start out by talking to us a little bit, laying some of the groundwork about what the challenges are for young people getting an education, and once they find their way into the education system, what are the challenges for getting out of it with some real skills?
Thanks. I think in very broad strokes, it's important to think about not just education, but about learning. And learning as the outcome that we desire through whatever education processes, whether that's formal or non-formal, that we pursue. And I think the challenges, particularly in the developing world in sub-Saharan Africa and whole southern hemisphere in many ways, is becoming a crisis of learning that I see has 3 major strands. The first is that question of access in the first place. Are there enough places, spaces, and are children able to attend? And we've made tremendous progress on the primary school level, particularly since the inception of the Millennium Development Goals and efforts toward education for all. So we have much better primary school attendance rates, and even close to gender parity in attendance at primary level in many countries. But attendance still remains, or access remains a problem, and it remains a critical problem at secondary level, where attendance levels from primary to secondary transition are like falling off of a cliff. I mean, there are countries, we just heard, Afghanistan, there are, did you say 6 or 9% of girls are in secondary school? So it's by far the minority, and then when you add a gendered lens, it's further minority within that. So there's a crisis in the bridge in transition to secondary school and access at secondary level. And then there's a question about the relevance of the content. Are youth learning the content that they need when they are in school, if they are lucky enough to get in? And we know, for example, in some sub-Saharan African countries that after 5 full years of schooling, children still have a 40% chance of being illiterate. That's stark. And that's very critical. And that's not, in their cases, it's not about access. It's about learning and the quality of what's happening in the system once they get in. And then I think the third stream that I think is a great challenge and obstacle is the content, not just the quality of the methodologies and the systems and approaches and content in the content in the curriculum, and whether it's relevant to help youth transition to higher education or to the local market. And those are enormous challenges. Those translate for me into obstacles that play out at the individual child level uniquely, and here I'll focus on sub-Saharan Africa, which is a context that I'm especially working with. But at the child level, what are the obstacles to secondary education? They're typical things that we already, probably many of us in the room know about. It's school fees. Free education for all is actually not free in most places. And uniform, how do you have the proper attire to allow you to attend? Shoes to be able to attend. So those basic inputs, writing utensils and so on. A perception of very poor return on investment for the time spent in education, not only of the youth, but also of their families. People don't see what the value is in it, particularly for girls, but even for boys when they don't feel that they're learning skills that are relevant or that can help them, though we know the opposite is really true. Then the other pragmatic things like distance to education, transportation problems, issues of safety. And to me, one of the most challenging issues is a lack of support. So it's not necessarily just the inputs, but the psychosocial support for youth to actually be supported to mentally, emotionally, to go to school, to persevere, to have role models. I've been to villages where my elementary school son has a higher level of education than anyone in the entire village. So it's very difficult for children to aspire to something that they're completely unaware of. And that also means there's a huge lack of supporting children to dream, to aspire to something, to set a goal and recognize or see a pathway to actually work toward that. So I'll stop there because I can go into this on and on, but that's what we're facing, and I think we need everyone's help to solve the problems.
So when we talk about education pathways, I realize that pathways probably to most of us who get our education or have gotten our education in the United States, the pathway is pretty straightforward. But certainly outside the United States, actually finding a path to get to school and stay in school and succeed to higher education is an enormous challenge, and there really is no perfect template for that. But Vivian is a remarkable success story already. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what your path was. How did you get to be a successful college student here at CGU?
Thank you, Richard, for this opportunity. I believe, like so many people say, your past doesn't determine your future. But I'm from the school of thought that if I look back to my past, it is going to motivate me to work hard towards my future so that the generations come behind me don't go through the same things that I went through. Just share with you a little bit about my life and how I came to be part of the Clinton Global Initiative University. I was born from a single family, and my mom really struggled so hard to make me go through my primary education. I am a product of giving, and I'm very proud about that. So during my primary school education, I wasn't able to access books, and I wasn't able to access food. So my primary school teachers were able to help me to get books and also access lunch. And I had to walk an hour distance every day in the morning and back home in the evening. I was determined because I knew the fruits of education at the end of the day. I worked tirelessly, and at the end of my 8th year, I managed to be one of the top girls in my province and secured a chance at Sarai Girls Center. Sarai Girls Center is a charitable school that provides education for girl child. Through Sarai Girls Center, I got 4-year scholarship. But back at my mind, I was like, I have 4-year scholarship. After this, what next? Because in Kenya, with a high school diploma, you can't go anywhere. You need added skills for you to be somebody who can be recognized in the community and also to feel empowered. So in 2006, the Global Give Back Circle was started. First, it was a mentoring program, and girls were assigned mentors from different parts of the world. And as the program continued, the founder, Linda Lockhart, thought, well, these girls, with the mentoring, they're able to share their experiences and what they're going through in life. But what about the education? Because they're going to end with the high school diploma. Then we had the financial partners coming in, and that's why we had USAID coming to support the program. And I believe that organizations are out there to help the youth, but even as youth, we have to seek the opportunities and act with confidence for us to bring the change that we talk about. So after my high school education, I went through a 9-month ICT training. I learned business education, financial skills, and HIV/AIDS. And after that, I went back to the community and got an internship with a clinic where I was doing HIV outreaches to the community. And I used my IT skills that I learned in the Microsoft IT lab to help the community. And how I help the community is by creating a database for this clinic and reporting to the Ministry of Health about this clinic, because it's one of those clinics in the rural parts of Kenya. And during my HIV outreaches to the community, I still believe in the rural parts of Kenya, people believe HIV is a myth, which is not true, because HIV is real and it's there. And unless you accept to know your status so that you can continue living positive, we'll continue having more death rates because of that. So I enlightened people about the HIV, told them why they need to be tested and to know their status, and to start on the ARVs for them to live longer. And then after that, using my ICT skills, I applied to 6 different universities in America. And I was fortunate enough to be accepted at Carthage College in Wisconsin, where I have 4-year scholarship. I'm a pre-med student and computer science minor. When you talk about that, you talk about your journey and all that, but I believe what has made me go far in life is giving. Many of us, we've always relied on being given, and we were entitled that I'm going to be given, I'm going to have this, I'm going to get this from this other person. But what are you giving out in your time and talent and skills? If we read from the book Giving by President Clinton, chapter 4, he has talked in the whole book about the financial partners, people like Paul Farmer giving billions of dollars to the organization. But he has also talked about giving in time, skills, and talent. Right now, I don't have money to give out, but I have skills that I learned in the IT lab. I have skills that I've learned through my living and growing up. Why can't I use that to change other person's life? The little you give in a big way is going to impact other person's life. And if you start giving right now, that's when you can say, oh, tomorrow if I have the money, I'm going to support this organization. But if you wait until you become if you wait until you want to say, I'm rich and I have all this money, that's when you start giving. You're not going to give with the heart of giving. You're going to give so that you can be acknowledged that you've given. So it's a challenge to us. And if we really want to bring out youth who are ready to bring the change, to bring the change for equality and access to opportunities, we should learn to be beneficiaries. But at the end of the day, we should be benefactors. So that's a challenge to all of us youth.
Thank you. And clearly a testament to why we care so deeply about education. We give someone like Vivian an education or help her get an education. Obviously, we didn't give it to her. She got it for herself. And the dividends go well beyond her. And you all, I know, are here because you've made commitments to put the education that you have received to great use. I want to ask Joel about what the challenges look like here in the United States, where clearly the systems are much more robust, but they aren't always enough to help young people find that pathway.
Yeah, certainly, we certainly have a lot of resources in this country, but still, we still have a lot of young people who are not making it through. In Los Angeles, where I focus my attention and my work these days, is 50% of students are not graduating school. It's a real tragedy. And I think that a lot of it has to do, many, many reasons. I think that what 826, the organization that I run in Los Angeles, what we focus on is a lot of what you're talking about, Vivian, too, this giving. We believe the only way we can do what we do is through the support of generous people who not only give money, but people who give their time. We have over 1,600 volunteers that are registered to support the work we do. And if you're not familiar with what we do, we provide after-school tutoring free to students. In Los Angeles, we have 2 locations. We have a Venice location and one in Echo Park. The students come to us from the communities surrounding us, and everything is free. And the volunteers come to us through word of mouth, through seeing the work that we do. We have these quirky sort of way of doing our work as well. We have storefronts at each of our centers. In San Francisco, they opened the pirate store in the front where you can actually walk in and buy pirate supplies. And so from the start, we try to break down the barriers of making it feel like it's something that's unattainable. We try to make it fun and engaging. In New York, they opened the superhero store, so you walk in and it's a real place where you buy supplies for superheroes. You can even try on a cape. We have a fan, so you could see what you look like in a cape. Kids love this stuff. They come through, but you remove a shelving unit, and behind it is a writing center, where we're very serious about reading and writing and homework and all that stuff that we need to do to help students get ahead. In Los Angeles, we opened the Echo Park Time Travel Mart, so it's a quickie mart for time travelers. And with all that fun, though, is a serious belief that by connecting adults from the community with young people who live in the same communities a lot of times, but are from completely different backgrounds and circumstances, but connecting them in a space, like in our centers, really just is an amazing thing to see happen, and the learning that's going on is incredible. Just to have that one-on-one attention, which is what we strive to provide young people, is something that we don't get very often. I don't know how much one-on-one attention you guys get, but it's something that we take for granted sometimes, and something hard to come by for young people too. Families bring their children to our centers, and they certainly do spend a lot of time with their children, but they don't have the language skills to help them with homework or to do the certain things that they need. So we have people who come in who are professional writers, who are retired, who come from interesting backgrounds, and they can sit there and work with students on homework and then focus on writing projects. Not only do they come to our centers, but we go into the classrooms. So we have partnerships with over 50 schools in Los Angeles alone, and we work with teachers who need our support to bring volunteers that are trained and who can come in and break down that ratio in classrooms. I was a teacher for 8 years in San Francisco at a public school. Classroom sizes average about 36 to 40 students in a class. It's tough. You give a writing assignment, you're grading not only that 140 class, of 40 papers in that one class, but you've got 5 classes. It's 200 papers sometimes that you're taking home with you. And on top of that, when do you have the chance to actually sit down with a student and give them that undivided attention that they need to understand what's working, what's strong in their writing, but what are areas that they could look at. And so we train volunteers to provide this kind of service in the classrooms. And folks, in Los Angeles, we have a lot of people who have extra time in the day who can come, but there are those who can't come during the day. So they come at night for the workshops that we offer in the evenings. And so it's really about getting people excited to help their communities, to help the young people, to go into the classrooms and see the real what's happening in the classrooms. There's been a lot of negative publicity, a lot of stuff out there about all the bad things happening in our schools, but there are amazing teachers, there's amazing work being done, but there's a lot of resources and needs. And so that's what we try to do, is provide that and get people from the communities excited about becoming more involved in those schools and in our centers.
One of the things that I got interested in the issue of education in the developing world, and girls in particular, while I was doing research on global poverty, and over again, people said to me, the best way to end global poverty is through education. And the thing that was most exciting to me as an individual and as a filmmaker, and one of the reasons that I think what's going on here at CGIU is so exciting, is because we are at a moment in the world where individual interventions, the kind of individual interventions of the Global Give Back Circle or of 826 LA really can make a difference. Education is one of those places where we don't always need the structure. We don't always need a system. And I started going out into the field and meeting young girls who were just absolutely inspiring. They didn't see themselves as victims. They saw themselves as opportunities to make change if they could just have a little piece of intervention. And when you ask them over and over again what they wanted to be, most often, in a classroom full of girls or a room full of girls, doctors and teachers. And I started asking, well, why doctors and teachers? And it was because those are the people that had made a difference in their life. Those are the people they knew in their community who had made an intervention that helped them, and they wanted to pass it on. So I'm wondering, Margaret, if you could talk to us about what are the most exciting interventions that you've seen going on out there in the developing world that you feel like aren't necessarily the traditional ones that we all expect, like building a new school or training more teachers, but the ones that really seem to spark something?
There are many, so I'll start with that. And I came across many today. I want to thank all of you who shared information at the fair because you've been tremendously inspiring to me. But I will, with the MasterCard Foundation, we're focusing, particularly our programming is around microfinance and youth learning. And in this work, there are a couple that really are standing out for us as just remarkable pinch-me stellar models. The first one is CAMFED, the Campaign for Female Education. And this model works by engaging entire communities in helping to identify the most disadvantaged girls who are at greatest risk of not being able to have access and then to be able to stay into school through secondary education. And then has an entire package of support that they provide for those girls that includes the community and involves the community in providing that support. So essentially the intervention fortifies safety nets within communities that can have a life long beyond the presence of a CAMFED supported student. And in this model, they also don't stop at getting the girl through high school, but focus on transition to internships and employment. So there's a real connection to having a job after they graduate. And so far, CAMFED has been remarkable, and this is primarily in rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa, where their successes are measured in 90% retention rate of girls, which is amazing for high school age. And then this great spillover effect of the quality of education showing for all the students in schools where there is a CAMFED, where there are CAMFED supported girls, everyone is benefiting, and that's coming out in exam results for standardized testing. For example, in one area in Tanzania, the entire school exam pass rates went up to 80%, which was a huge leap. So it's not just benefiting the girl, but the community is stepping in to create better social infrastructure, or create social safety nets where they didn't exist, and they will last. And then one step further, the CAMFED graduates, if you will, have an opportunity to join an alumni network and therefore become the benefactors. So they go from the beneficiary at the start to the benefactor at the end. It's a tremendous model. And that model for me, is for a very rural area where there are few jobs, few opportunities, and very few schools. Another model that is striking, and it's in a totally different kind of paradigm, is EFE, Education for Employment, and they operate primarily in the Middle East and Northern Africa. And in this case, they focus on identifying youth who've actually completed a university education. So in those areas, they've had access. But they're still disadvantaged. They have been, for a number of factors. And the skills they have are not market relevant for the jobs that are available. So in this program, they actually work with on the demand side of organizations, companies, entities that are looking to hire and identify the skill sets necessary and then create a bridge program. And the successful transition from unemployment to employment is 80-some% for that program. So those are just two models, but there are many, many that are inspiring. So I'll stop there.
So Vivian, we talk about, one of the reasons this panel is focused on adolescents is because we really have made great strides, certainly in the United States and internationally, in primary education, in basic education through 6th grade. But we talk about getting to secondary education, whether it's lower secondary school or upper secondary school, and as Margaret said, it's like falling off a cliff. The numbers just, they go from pretty respectable looking to completely appalling very fast. How did you keep from falling off this cliff? What was it that made you able to make the transition into secondary school and stay with it? What was the key for you, aside from your obvious inner strength, but I'm wondering in terms of what came to you from the outside world that made you able to succeed?
As I said earlier, I'm a product of giving. And when I was in my primary school, I didn't know that I would be able to go to secondary education. So through the help of my teachers and them continue to encourage me that there's a brighter future ahead and I need to continue struggling and working hard, I managed to get to secondary education. But not so many girls in my primary education managed to go to secondary education. Many of them fell through the cracks of poverty, and some of them right now have children out there. And what I feel I'm so lucky about is I was taught the art of giving. And one of the big ethos of the Global Give Back Circle is giving back. And once you become a member of the Global Give Back Circle, you have a commitment that you have to write down, and you have to do it and write a progress record. And after every 1 year, you change your commitment. And right now, here we have a commitment called Hey Sister, Get Clued Up. It's a peer-to-peer networking. We want to reach out to disadvantaged girls in Africa to educate them about financial literacy, social literacy, and health. And how we are going to do this is about the butterfly effect. We are going to create up a site where every other girl who can access internet will log into our site and take an oath to be a butterfly. And from what I know, if butterflies flap their wings, they can be able to create tornadoes in Johannesburg. And this is to show the impact that we youth, if we decide to work together, we can create, and the change we can bring in the world today.
So Joel, when the kids come into 826, I'm interested in what it is that you're giving them aside from a place to go that you feel like changes the equation for them.
You know, what blew me away about 826 when I've been involved with 826 since the beginning in San Francisco, and what blew me away when I first went to the center, I'd been benefited from volunteers coming into my classroom and working with my students, and then I went to the center, and I knew, like, at the end of the day at school, kids couldn't wait to get out of the classroom. I mean, it's 8 hours of the day, but they go into these centers, they would go into 826, and they were just excited to go in there, like they were going into a play structure or something, and so there was something about that just really attracted me to the organization. And now when I see it when kids come to us, I'm sort of putting it together and figuring out that students, first of all, feel really safe at 826. And in some of the communities we work in, the safety is huge. Just having a place to go after school where you're not going to be dragged into doing things that you may not want to do, or to being involved with people you might not want to be involved in, is a huge, great thing. Students are coming in because they're also meeting, believe it or not, they get excited about the adults and the volunteers that they're meeting and they're connecting with. It's a lot of these people create bonds and friendships with these students, and they're excited to work with them, and they're not afraid of them. They're not coming in because they're not going to be judged. They're not going to be told, hey, you didn't do your homework, you didn't finish up this assignment. They're going to work together. They're going to sit down, they're going to talk, they're going to understand what needs to happen, and they're going to coach them through it as best they can. And they're going to engage in some kind of creative writing project at the end, where we're going to allow them to have the time to sit there and piece something together. And for some students, that just means like a few sentences, and that's a lot. Other students can put together more, and paragraphs and longer stories. But having that time to be creative, to learn from an adult mentor, and to feel very welcome and in a space, I think it goes a long way for a lot of these young people who don't have alternatives a lot of times.
One of the things that is most exciting about the issue of education right now is also one of the most depressing. But this is, for all intents and purposes, low-hanging fruit in the developing world. And all of you sitting here in this room are education experts compared to most of the people working out there in education in the developing world. By virtue of being, college students, you know as much about education and have as many skills in terms of imparting that knowledge well beyond, your limited world, as thousands, millions of people working in education in the developing world, and an opportunity to really make meaningful change. And the most basic way to create that kind of change is through mentorship. And I'm wondering if you could each, just in the couple minutes before we take some questions, talk to me about your own personal experiences, either as a mentor or as a mentee, and what it is about that relationship that seems to be so much at the core of education success. Margaret, you want to go first?
Sure, but there are so many things to say on that particular question. I've benefited from receiving support from mentors and been a mentor for as long as I can remember. And to me, I think this idea of mentorship, volunteerism, and peer-to-peer models, Dalmuzi, I'm not sure if you're in the room, but someone I met today over lunch just reiterated that you don't have to have resources to give. Time and your mind, your patience, your kindness, that's enough. But generally, you have more to give than you think. So, I started tutoring and mentoring students with learning disabilities and so on when I was in college. And it was incredibly rewarding because they were youth who didn't feel capable of learning another language or, passing this particular math class. And to see them actually, not only pass, but to excel is tremendous. And, equally, I've had things. But one of my most powerful mentorship stories is actually about my son. So I will tell this story. He may be embarrassed if he hears this. My son was about 12. He's 14 now. And I encouraged him to start volunteering and doing some mentorship and tutoring. And he was mentoring and tutoring a little girl who was in first grade. It was a new immigrant. And a second language learner of English, where she was trying to pass first grade. And her parents couldn't help her. I mean, it was one of the situations you described. They were linguistically not prepared to help her get through the curriculum. And he mentored and tutored her about 3 days a week. And her family came to us with her report card. I have this image in my mind I'll never forget. It was like a ceremony to them. Came walking down our sidewalk with her report card and nearly tears in their eyes for the difference this made in her. And she had gone from, her scores were 20, 30% to 90%. And my son saw the power of giving when he didn't even think he had anything to give. And I hope he continues, but that's for me one. But they don't stop. They go everywhere. Everyone has someone to give to very near them.
Wonderful. Vivian? Oh, Joel, go next, yeah.
Sure. With the volunteering, I didn't grow up even understanding the concept of volunteering as much. My parents are immigrant family, came from Cuba. My mother's Cuban, my dad's from Spain. And so a lot of my early understanding of the world was you had to figure out how to make money and how to survive. And, and so until I, went to college and began to see a lot of sort of different things happening, university settings and volunteerism and all these things going on, it wasn't until then that I really started to understand it. And then until I saw it in the classroom even, when I was teaching, that I could see the power of adults who live in these same communities could come in to these schools and connect with students who they wouldn't connect with outside of the classroom. And the power of that just really just has always stayed with me. And I think at university settings, I know that there's already so much work to do, and I know that there's even service learning opportunities where there's a real desire to get into the classrooms, but we need more of that. If there's even here in this country, I mean, we have in Los Angeles, we have USC, UCLA, we have all these great schools, but finding ways to connect those students to opportunities right in their own neighborhoods would make tremendous change right now. And it is something that changes lives. It is something that, even as a teacher, when I was in the classroom, I taught the classes, but there were those times in between when I was the mentor, and when I was sitting down at lunch with a student or after school or at a game or whatever. Those are the moments when you really get to connect with a person, and that's the most powerful thing you can give.
I'm interested in Vivian's experience. One of the things that's been most dramatic for me in the travels I've done in the last year or two looking at girls' education is the lack of role models that so many girls and boys have in the developing world. They just don't have examples of what an educated, successful person looks like. So I'm interested now, when you go back to Kenya, do you feel like you're in a different position? Do you feel like you're a role model for these kids? And what does that feel like? What does that mean to you?
Wow. When I go back to Kenya, I've always felt like I'm a role model to my peers because I've always been helping them. I've had sessions with them, even the ones who fell through the crack of poverty by getting married after high school, by ending up into some lives that they didn't expect. I've always been like a role model because I've shared with them my experiences and I've helped them and I've told them there's so much into life and people make mistakes, but you learn from the mistakes and you move on. And some of them right now, they've been able to learn from that and they've tried to empower themselves by going back to school, and some of them out there still looking for opportunities that they can seek so that they can be able to better their lives. So I think I'm a role model.
I think so too. We're going to open it up to some questions before we break up into smaller discussion groups, but we'll bring the lights up and there are some microphones out there somewhere. We're going to take a couple of questions. Oh goodness, I don't know who to call on. Sure, right here in the, I don't know where the microphones are, that would probably be a good start. Why don't we come down here in the center and this young woman in the lavender shirt,
Thank you. Thank you for all your stories. My name is Isol Kim. I'm from MIT, and I started the Leadership Training Institute, which is a mentorship leadership program. And I've done a lot of mentorship and leadership throughout the years, but one thing I'm learning is that like my commitment, and I'm sure a lot of ours, is kind of supplementary to what our school system isn't able to give to us. And I have this notion that schooling in America and a lot of other places doesn't equal education right now. And there's a lot of things that are lacking. And you know, why don't, and my question is, why don't we have role models? Why don't we have these opportunities to connect with professionals in the schooling system, and what can we do to actually change the school system?
Anyone in particular you want to tackle that?
I guess we can go with Megan.
That's a great question, but it's, to me it's not limited to the US, and I think that has to do with a paradigm shift that needs to happen in education from being teacher-centered to being youth-centered and child-centered. And there are places and systems and pockets that do that better than others. But it hasn't yet been systematized, and so I think you've witnessed where it's short. I would say the short answer to that is don't wait for someone else to do something about it. We can do a lot, and my 12-year-old can do a lot for an 8-year-old. So, that to me that's the short answer. Is that if we wait for a system to change, it'll happen beyond our lifetime. But we can start changing it from the inside out by behaving differently. So that's my short answer.
I think also, one of the things that's most exciting about education, one of the reasons it's such a powerful tool is because in a problem that is so overwhelming, so many of the problems that we're discussing here at the Clinton Global Initiative are so overwhelming, you don't have to tackle it all. Just pick a few kids, change their lives, they will take it from there. I mean, look at Vivian, she was given something in her life and she's now giving back, So education is an intervention that pays double dividends well beyond your own role. If you make an intervention, it will then pass itself on almost by definition. Mm-hmm. Who's next? Yeah, over here. This guy in the orange shirt with the, yes.
Thank you very much again. Sorry. My question is for any one of you, but I'm working with this Bonner Foundation, a Bonner program. It's in my institution at the College of New Jersey, and we're working with a community partner. It's called Academic Sports Academy, funded by Greg Grant, as a former, NBA basketball player. So, however, we're creating this program where we tutor children, and it's an after-school program where we give them a training session of 1 hour, just a gym hour, and then after that, it's an hour of tutoring. However, there are problems with some students who are enrolled through the program through their parents and through the people that we want to register for. So some of the students are there, when we tutor them, they kind of don't want to be there at all, and they're just saying I don't need this, I really don't care, and like they're just minors and still. But I mean, there are some that are so very hesitant in trying to want to become educated, and we're there trying to be role models for them because most of these kids are coming from urban areas and they don't have those role models. So is there any way in particular where we can like, I guess, influence them to show them that what we're doing is a good idea and that they should be there in order for them to become better educated and to become better role models for their community when they go out of those areas?
Joel, I think that has your name on it.
That would be for me. The folks who help you, are they students as well, or are they folks from the community?
Yeah, most of the students that try to help out with this after school are students from my institution and, you know, adults who want to bring in their own kids into the program. However, the kids who go into that program are very hesitant into receiving our own aid. So how do we, you know, I guess implement, well, an idea or anything, a thought inside of them to say that, you know, what we're doing is a good idea and that they should learn from this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, what works for us, I mean, I could speak to what works for us, especially with the centers, is we have a space that's like school but not school, and so there's this feeling of, you know, you're coming to a different place and you're still going to work on schoolwork, but you're not feeling like you're in that environment. Not to say that that's a solution, but that seems to work on our end. But when we come into the classrooms, you know, we rely on a teacher's classroom to be set up in a way that would allow for volunteers to be able to come in and to work alongside of students on specific projects. So sometimes having a real sort of focus on what those projects are that the students need help on, maybe a better connection with their teachers, or finding a way to know, you know, if there's something that can go back to the teachers that they can connect and know that, you know, at this session I'm going to get something done that will then benefit me in the classroom. I think another thing that works for us is we have project-based learning activities. So when the students are done with homework, we focus on reading and then writing. We publish books regularly. We try to have some kind of art-based project that they can all be a part of, and so it's kind of not connected to the same sort of thing that's happening in the classroom, but it's allowing them to be creative, allow them to use some of those muscles that, you know, unfortunately are not being tapped enough these days in school. So finding activities where they are learning and they are being creative, but where they're not necessarily maybe reminded of maybe the stuff that they're trying to avoid in the classroom, just for a period of time to give them a chance to sort of regain sort of maybe that energy that they'll need to focus on the other stuff that they need to focus on.
And I just wanted to add to that. I think Jessica last night said something that's really important. I think that one of your successes is that you're doing it is to make it fun. And for me, there is something that every child likes. So trying to identify what that is and then turn things inside out a bit. You know, for example, if a child loves video games, well, you can use that as a link to say, how do those work? You know, how did somebody invent that? Isn't that amazing? And so, you know, I'm just, again, being very youth-centered about it, because it sounds to me that, they're there in part because they're required or forced to be there, and their natural reaction is going to push back on that, particularly at certain developmental ages that you can expect that. So to take away that sense of requirement on them and convert it into an opportunity by connecting it to things that they like. It might be doing an inventory or something to ask them, you know, what they're particularly interested in, and then just be really creative about how you start selling the value of what you know you're offering to things, to them through those channels of things they love.
Yeah, go ahead. The blue sweater.
Is there a database? Sorry. Wow. Hi. I'm Jenna Rhodes from Nebraska. Is there a database for those projects, those learning activities that you talk about? Because I would love to learn about those.
We actually have a few publications. One's called Don't Forget to Write, and it's lesson plans. It's actually connected to the standards, national standards and everything. Great resource for teachers, and it's available at our centers or online. So just don't forget to write. You bet.
Who's next? Yes, back there in the corner. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm with an organization called Books and Beyond. And we noticed that a lot of the push recently has been towards universal access to primary education, like you were talking about. And now it's emerging that, you know, a real problem is the quality of that education. So while continuing to provide, you know, pathways and opportunities for adolescents, how can we incorporate, you know, mentoring opportunities for the teachers or building the capacity of teachers in order to, you know, improve the process overall instead of just creating more work for teachers that can't handle it because maybe they haven't had the resources?
Margaret?
Sure. Well, that's great. Your point is really important that, yes, we've made progress on access. We can't stop tending to that because we don't have universal access yet, particularly in the developing world. But now we have to create the space, in the space that we gained with access, now we have to focus on quality therein. And this again requires some innovation and creative two-for-ones and shortcuts. You know, as a former teacher myself, I mean, one of the things that I recall is this mountain of writing. How could I get through coding and giving diagnostic feedback, and feedback that was critical, but also diagnostic, so that the student could actually understand the mistakes they made, understand patterns of mistakes they made, and then rectify it. So, you know, first, technology is a tremendous tool. I mean, I was agonizing through checking spelling and grammar on papers manually before spell check, grammar check became a universal access tool for students. So that tells you how old I am, by the way. It's been a while. So use technology wherever you can. Try to help teachers to use technology. Social media, youth are so much more comfortable and so much better at that than those of us who are just slightly older than you. And you know, there's a lot that you can share and create support groups from teacher to teacher. So as much as, you know, the peer youth to youth power can be a catalyst for positive change, so can that peer support for teachers and sharing shortcuts, things like that. But teacher training and investment in ongoing teacher training once someone becomes a teacher is really critical, and that's something that is also part of what we need to address in the systems change that's required.
We have time for one more question, but I just want to add to that your excitement about education matters. And I think it's important to remember, you know, there's been a lot of talk in the United States about how we don't give enough respect to teachers. Teachers aren't valued. Being a teacher isn't considered a really good job. And let me tell you that that's, you know, 100 times worse in most of the developing world. Teacher is a terrible job, and most people don't want it, and many teachers aren't very well educated themselves. So as you go about your work and your commitments, both here and abroad, bringing your excitement and your passion for the whole idea of education into these communities really does matter. It shows them that education is not something to be, you know, pushed aside to the sort of the lowest responsibility. You know, it's not one step up from working at the post office. It's actually, it's vital to these communities to be healthy and thriving.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Another thing that doesn't cost anything is to thank people, to acknowledge them, to create some kind of a prize for, you know, the best mentor teacher, you know, those kinds of things. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful way, without any cost really, to begin to shift mindsets around. And, you know, if I'm exhausted after a 12, 15, or sometimes 20-hour day in the field, if someone says thank you, I feel re-energized. I think the same is true. There's a lot that we can do to just begin to communicate the positives in the face of the challenges that we have.
All right, do we have time for one more question, or do we want to go to our... No, we do not. I'm told that we don't. I'll answer your question after, but unfortunately we're going to go to group discussions here at the tables. We have hopefully a slide up here for the two topics that we want you guys to spend some time talking about amongst yourselves, and we're going to come down and walk around and see if we can contribute anything to the conversation. And if you can, as you're talking, try and appoint one person from your table. We're going to call on some of you afterwards and just try and get some feedback about what you've come up with, and see if we can share some new ideas and new thinking about both what actions you can take to address the issues you've just heard about, and what impact could the lessons from our discussion have on your commitment. I think those are pretty straightforward. Please don't feel limited to those. If there are other things that you feel eager and passionate to talk about, we'd love to hear about it.